Hello, my name is Dr. Eloy Garcia, and I am a history instructor here at TSC, and welcome to our virtual History Day. Students, during our normal History Day, if we weren't in the pandemic, you would have the chance to look at, try on some of the different armor that we'd have available on the different tables. Today, I'd like to talk to you about some old world armor that eventually makes its way and some of its influences into the New World later on in the 15th century. I'd like to start, students, by showing you this fine Persian helmet. What you see is the chainmail back. You also see, students, the adjustable nose piece. Some of these helmets are called nasal helmets because of the protection for the nasal area, the face and the nose. You'll see a spike on the top, students, and you'll also notice, students, this is called damascened armor. Okay, this is fine parade armor. What you see is steel that has been inlaid with the precious metal, usually silver or gold. This is gold, students. It's etched, and then solid gold, students, is damascened into the armor. This is a fine piece of parade armor. Middle Eastern origin, probably circa 13th, 14th century. Okay, that's the parade helmet. And then these attributes, students, they would have feathers, etc., to add to the glory, especially when you're riding on horseback. Imagine you're flying with large feathers, etc., horsehair, plumes. It just adds another shocking visual element to the rider on horseback. Okay, let's see what else we got. That was the example of the helmet. Let me show you also examples, students, of a small buckler or a small shield that they would use. This is a small shield, students, also of Middle Eastern origin. Also, you notice the fine damascened ornamentation. This one has also been cut, right, in very intricate geometrical shapes. What you've got is basically an armband here where you would hold to allow you quick access and agility when you're fighting with the sword. Okay, this is a small buckler or a shield. Again, this is parade armor. Let's see what else we got. I want to show you an example, students, of some body armor. This is a small forearm piece, again, highly intricate, inlaid with gold. They're very heavy, by the way, just because of the gold content to protect your forearm when you're in battle. Now, this, students, would also be used in collaboration with what you see now. I'm wearing a chainmail coat, okay, a chainmail coat. These are small little rings, students, that have been fastened together. It's almost like a sewn material. This is ancient body armor. For any of you veterans out there, you know the importance of body armor to protect your vital organs. The ancient body armor, students, some of this that came from the Middle East, was chain link. If you were very wealthy and were able to buy finer suits of armor, students, the bigger the links, the more intricately woven, the more protection they would give you. This one, students, has smaller links. It's not as intricate, it's not elaborate and heavy as some of the other chainmail outfits that you can see. But this would provide a pretty decent level of protection, uh, mostly from glancing blows from a sword. Now, remember, though, this will keep stuff from penetrating all the way. It'll still penetrate to a certain degree. But remember, if someone hits you with the thing, it can also do damages to your bones. Okay, let me give you an example. This, students, is a Persian war axe. Okay, with these axes were used, it has basically three different weapons on it. The first weapon is to allow you to split open any type of plate armor, right? The second one would also be used, students, to knock someone in the head. And then also, after you opened up their plate armor, then you finish them off with the pointed edge. Now, this particular war axe, students, is one of my favorites, not only because of its elaborate Islamic symbolism and beautiful designs, but also because it has two parts. This war axe, students, comes in two parts, basically sews together. So when you're in battle and you need basically two weapons, if you're quick, now you've got a war axe, students, and almost a short little lance, a pike that you can fight two-handed. Many of these warrior students that had been brought up and skilled in hand-to-hand combat were very agile and able to fight with two different weapons, left and right hand, and ambidextrous. Okay, it's one of my favorite weapons in my collection, students. Islamic war axe, short javelin. Okay, let's see what else we got. Now, these were Middle Eastern weapon students that are going to be introduced through Asia into Spain in the 7th century. Now, remember, the uh, the Moors from North Africa students are going to invade Spain in the year 700. They're going to stay there till 1492. 1492 until King Ferdinand and Isabella basically unite the Spanish kingdoms to fight back what they called the Moorish hordes who had invaded the Catholic peninsula of Spain. Now, these types of armor students who we had talked about, the shield, the war axe, the helmet, are also going to be brought with those Spanish soldiers, with the Spanish students when they cross over into the New World. Now, let's talk about the frontier region of areas like Texas and New Mexico. Students, they would, through various expeditions, bring this type of armor into the Southwest, what we know now as the borderlands. They would wear chainmail coats that wasn't as heavy and exhausting as plate armor. They would use different types of battle axes, more predominantly the halberd, that were 6 or 7 foot long with an axe edge on them and a point, maybe a spontoon. They would use various shields and body armor. But also remember, students, as most soldiers recognize, body armor needs to be adequate to protect you, but it also needs to be uh, feasible in the field. If it's too hot, if you're overheating, if it's too exhausting, if it rots or corrodes quickly in subtropical climates, most of the time soldiers, if they can't use it, they'll just jettison it and try to find and use some different things. Now let's talk about in the New World, students. We talked about the use of the steel buckler that came from the Middle East in the area. What there's going to develop in the Southwest, students, because metal and steel were so valuable and so rare in the frontier regions, is a different type of shield, what we call the adarga. The adarga, students, had been used by the Muslim armies of the Moor students in Spain and the Spanish Peninsula, and they were this large, heart-shaped pieces of thick leather. Okay, this is an adarga shield that I made, students. Okay, what you see painted on is basically the crest of Leon and Castile, the saying of the Holy Roman Empire and the Spanish Empire, plus ultra, from the Presidio Santa Fe. Remember, students, Santa Fe, New Mexico, this was part of the Spanish borderlands up until 1821, and they did have a presidio there that was put in place to house the Spanish soldiers to protect the missionaries. Now, this adarga, students, was made out of 2 or 3 levels, if you see it in the back, laced together by hand of elk and cowhide. Then, after it's laced together, students, it's boiled in hot water and what's called bouillon. After leather, students, is boiled and shrinked in hot water, it gets this armor-like appearance. These shield, students, were known to reject arrows. They couldn't reject a shot from a flintlock or a wheellock later on, but very good, students. They were lightweight. They were very nimble. They allowed the soldiers on horseback and the Spanish soldiers on the frontier, students, adequate protection against arrows, against most glancing blows of from the native weapons, and it wouldn't corrode. Okay, the Spanish adarga. These are very extremely rare to find something like this. This is a reproduction, students, that I made on my own. It took a while to build it. Pretty proud of it. I think it came out pretty nice. But to find something like this, students, is very rare. The only other ones I've seen, one in the Royal Armory in Madrid, Spain. I've seen another one in the Alhambra Palace in Granada, and another one in the Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe, and one other at the Bullock Museum in Texas, the adarga, these small leather shields. Now, along with these small leather shields, students, something else that they would use that eventually makes its way from Asia into the Americas is the use of gunpowder, the flintlock. Students, this is a small example of what would be a French cavalry pistol, circa about 1801, 1802. It's fired, students, by igniting a piece of flint up against a piece of steel. You would put your gunpowder, students, in the piece of steel. Well, let me start. First of all, what you would do, students, these were muzzle loading weapons. You would put in your 54 caliber slug, usually a small lead ball. You'd put your wadding in your powder, students, and you would pack it down. Then you would open up your pan, your flash pan is what they would call. You'd load it up with some powder, students. Then you would cock your pistol. The flintlock would move forward. The flint, students, if you see the flint wrapped in a piece of leather, would strike against the striker, causing a spark. The spark, students, would ignite a small explosion into the combustion chamber, firing the pistol, a small mini explosion. Now, these students, they look cool. They're heavy, they're good weapons, but the unfortunate thing is that they're very unreliable. The powder would get wet, the powder would get moist, and they were prone to misfiring. Now, students, these are the kind of pistols that Aaron Burr would perhaps use in his duel against Alexander Hamilton, where they would walk off 7, 15 paces or whatever it was, word turn and fire. Most of these things were prone to misfiring. This is where you get the saying, students, of flash in the pan, a person who comes to light and does something great and then all of a sudden fizzles out. The flash in the pan, students, is reference to this pan. When it wouldn't fire, it would sizzle real bright and it wouldn't fire. Most of these weapons, students, were used for personal defense, but unfortunately, because they were so unreliable, they would have a very heavy butted end. If you see this one, this is a butted end covered with a bronze plate, students, that were used mostly for a club. Unfortunately, you read about these primary sources where most of the time, maybe you'd get a shot off, you would take so long to reload, by that time they'd be on top of you, and then you start swinging it and try to save your life, okay? The small flintlock pistol, about circa 1801. Now, these weapons, students, the flintlock pistol and the adarga, interesting enough, in the places of borderlands of New Mexico, California, and Arizona, where the leather-jacketed soldiers of Spain would use these weapons, they would use these weapons, students, in the American continent. Interesting enough, from about the 16th century, from the 19th century, for about 300 years, students, we were still using this very basic technology. And in fact, when the United States invades the borderlands, students, in 1846, the people of Texas, California, New Mexico, who rise up to protect their lands from the US invasion, are still using these antiquated weapons. So you can barely guess the reason, students, for the downfall and for the US eventual conquest of the Southwest was due to a large part to antiquated weapons and the lack of modern weapons by the Mexican people who were trying to protect their lands. So I just wanted to talk to you about these few weapons, students, show you a few examples of my own personal collection. And I'm hoping, students, that in the future we're allowed to do a true example of History Day, where you can walk with us, touch these weapons, shoot them, some of the weapons, dry fire, of course, and maybe handle some of these battle axes, okay? I thank you for your time, and I hope you guys have a good day.